Welcome back to the freeCodeCamp podcast. I'm Quincy Larson, teacher and founder of freeCodeCamp.org. And each week we bring you insight from developers, entrepreneurs, and ambitious people who are getting into tech. This week we're joined by Seth Goldin. He's an open source project maintainer, developer, a prolific freeCodeCamp contributor, and he is a computer science student at Yale. Welcome, Seth.
Thank you for having me, Quincy.
Yeah, it's great to have you here, man. You're somebody whom I've enjoyed talking with for years at this point, and you have a very special relationship with a gentleman who has also contributed a lot to freeCodeCamp, Sam Crombie. And I wanted to start by just going back in time a few years to how you met Sam.
Yeah, so Sam and I actually met. We're both originally from South Florida, and we met through a mutual friend, Joe, who's also one of my really good friends. And they were working together on a project, and Joe and I had worked together on a project, and somehow Sam and I got connected, and we all have this interest in ed tech, and that's education technology. And so it just immediately hit it off. And our first big project together, Sam and I, we recognized that there's this amazing wealth of resources that exist on the internet, which is the fact that most college CS curriculums are available online for free publicly.
Yeah.
And at the time we saw that these were courses that were just being passed around on Reddit through Google Sheets. People would be sharing Google Sheets of these are all the Stanford CS courses, or these are all the MIT CS courses. And we were okay, we could probably build a better interface than Google Sheets via Reddit post.
Yeah.
For just sort of agglomerating and collecting all of those resources to make them more accessible to people, to make it easier to find. So that was our first project that we worked on together. And
collegecompendium.org. Again,
yes.
A giant directory of online courses that you can take in most cases for free through various universities, including, many prestigious universities like Yale. So tell me a little bit about how you two met. What were the circumstances? Were you working on similar projects, or did you just bump into each other at a party?
It wasn't a party. I was working on an academic information system for the school district of Palm Beach County at the time. And Sam and Joe were working on a hall pass system during COVID. So a digital hall pass solution. And there was just a lot of overlap in our interests. We got connected and just started talking. And what actually ended up happening was that project, Compendium, which isn't super maintained, but there's still a lot of amazing resources that are on that website for free still today. We learned a lot about a lot of the challenges that exist with auditing courses online. And so that's how we made our first freeCodeCamp course. Was we recognized that there are a lot of sort of tips and tricks that you can use to help yourself get through a lot of these courses that we had discovered through our process of auditing. CS courses like Berkeley 61B, for example, is a really famous example. And over the years, Sam and I looked at ML courses, NLP courses, data structures,
machine learning, natural language processing. Sorry, I'm just gonna there are lots of acronyms used in computer science, CS.
It's true.
And I'll just, if I interject occasionally, it's just to make sure that everybody in the audience knows what we're talking about here.
Of course. So we thought that could be a really useful addition to the freeCodeCamp community, and it seems like it was. It was
absolutely. Course. Hundreds of thousands of people have watched the auditing course. And we weren't sure at the time. Are people really that interested in formally auditing a university course when they could just go watch like, video recordings of courses or do like the online course version of it through like, Coursera or edX or something like that. But it turns out there's a lot of interest among developers in the FreeCodeCamp community. So yeah, thanks for making that course.
Of course. It's something that we were really proud of. And I think a lot of the things that we did after that were a reflection of what that experience taught us, which is it's really challenging to finish a course online. Like learning online is really hard. And so the next thing that we worked on, Sam and I, was this tool that we were trying to build to help people get through courses, like sort of a digital TA, which was like a very, very early version of ChatGPT, using GPT-3 to create basically a chatbot in like April of 2022, I think it was.
Mm-hmm.
And so a fun story actually is I ended up skipping my graduation for high school to fly to Dartmouth for like a pitch competition that was happening there.
Yeah, Dartmouth
Same
being
weekend.
the school that Sam just graduated from recently. But this was back your high school graduation.
Yeah, so that we could like pitch this new idea and get started on working on it. And that eventually turned into a tool that Joe ended up joining us for, and the three of us worked together on it for about a year. Eventually it being called Friday.
Friday,
Was,
like his girl Friday, like the idea of a chatbot that can help guide you through a whole lot of struggles that you might encounter trying to get through these courses, right?
Yeah, and it was an incredible experience to work on that with the two of them, and hopefully it helped a lot of students. We had a lot of students using it over the span of the last year. So I think like in general, when I think about sort of courses and auditing courses, like it has never been easier to do that than it is today with tools like ChatGPT and all of these advances recently in large language models. Like even taking courses in person, it's sort of like a massive step forward that it's difficult to imagine what life was like before these tools existed. Like,
Yeah.
I find myself constantly asking questions now that I know I'm going to get like a quick response to that makes sense and is thorough, that like a Google search wouldn't have provided, as succinctly or as explanatory before. And that's actually probably a good segue into the second course that we worked on.
Yes, and just to be clear, we're going to talk a lot about AI. That's going to be a huge thing we talk about later. But I want to hear about like one of the earlier versions of AI, Google search itself. I mean, the PageRank algorithm and all the additional software they layered on top of it is this tool that, I mean, where does the AI really begin? I mean, it used to just be if-then logic, and now it's neural networks and things like that. But somewhere in between was Google search, and Google search still is incredibly useful. I use it, I don't know, 50 times a day probably. That's not an exaggeration. But I also use LLMs. I use GPT-4 a lot, especially for language learning, as I've talked a little bit about in previous episodes of the FreeCodeCamp podcast. But maybe you could talk a little bit about your course on Google searching, this technology that's been with us for like 20 plus years that a lot of people take for granted. Like, don't you just type what you want? No, right? You don't just type what you want. There's a whole lot of different kind of tactics you can use to get what you want out of Google, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's something that over the years, like we had picked up a lot of sort of tips and tricks about using Google search to like more quickly, more accurately find what you're looking for. Like, sure, you can just sort of type into the search bar or anything, and Google is really good at finding what it is that you're looking for, not just Google, search engines in general. Like that's what they're meant to do. But there are a lot of like operators that you can add to your query to make it more accurately find what you're looking for, especially when you're programming and you're looking to like debug this like one error that you can't figure out, and you're trying to find that like one Stack Overflow post or GitHub forum comment that like solves your problem. something as simple as just like putting quotations around like the specific thing that you're looking for so that it exact match searches for it. I use that like every day. That's
Yeah.
like worth it to watch the first 5 minutes of that course if you didn't know that was a thing that existed. And there's a lot of operators like that I think I find really valuable. I think another, like that course was sort of a combination of a bunch of things. Like it was like anything that could possibly be useful to you about Google. It was how Google used to work, how Google works today to our best understanding, a lot of these operators that you can use. And
Yeah.
then also just like strategies for when you're searching. Like this, I think becomes also, it remains relevant even in a world of large language models in that like it's still all about how you prompt the model. Like the question that you ask is just as important as what it is that you're trying to find. Like you sort of have to imagine like what it is that you're trying to end up with and then craft a prompt or a query that you think will best result in that result versus that
Yeah.
just sort of like putting in like a question. And LLMs are pretty good at answering those things too,
Yeah.
but
Large language models.
it's also like, yeah, very much about
Sorry,
problem
sorry. I just
understanding.
wanted to jump in just in case anybody doesn't know that acronym yet. You're going to hear that a lot over the next few years. Large language models, LLMs. Just, just to kind of like recapitulate what you just said. Communication is ultimately what this is, and programming is communicating what is in your head to a computer. Right? Google searching effectively is communicating what you want to a computer. Prompt engineering, if you want to call it that, like essentially the art of getting an LLM to tell you what or give you the information that you need, right? Or do the task that you need it to do. It's all about communicating, and the way that you communicate with a human, a native English speaking human that grew up with similar cultural context to you and everything like that. Like you grew up in South Florida, I grew up in Oklahoma. Like the way you and I would communicate is very different from how you would communicate with Google or you would communicate with GPT-4, right? So the tactics that you use to effectively communicate and get the machine to do your bidding, essentially. That's what your Google course is about, right?
Yeah, and I think like the thing is the end goal, I think at least, is for the way that we interact with computers to be exactly the same as the way we interact with other people. That is
Yeah.
possible and like eventually something that I mean just makes the most intuitive
Yeah.
sense. Like that's what
I
programming
mean,
is
I would agree
too,
to
right?
a point. However, like with a human, you do have to kind of be polite. You don't have to be polite to a computer. A computer does not care about politeness.
That's true.
If you look at like, and I always, I'm a huge Star Trek fan, especially the Next Generation, which is my personal favorite. But I'm working through like Deep Space Nine, and I enjoyed Voyager and stuff too. But if you look at how they talk to a computer, it's incredibly imperative, but it's also very declarative in the sense that like they're telling the computer exactly what to do, but the computer is also able to kind of make inductive leaps and figure out, oh, they probably meant this or this. But the way they talk to the computer is not like, hey, how are you doing, computer? Could you please do this for me? They're just like, computer, XYZ, and the computer goes and does it. So in a way, like communicating with a computer that doesn't have feelings, doesn't care about, like, it doesn't have a physical form, doesn't have all these different considerations, emotions that the humans have, it can be much more efficient and direct. And you can give it like, you could just give it a big line of like code, essentially. Instead, like where it would take forever to like articulate exactly what you want, code can be much more succinct in some instances for explaining what you want to be done. So while I agree that, there's this book called Snow Crash that I read when I was a kid, and he has like a librarian, and he has these conversations with the librarian, and the librarian teaches him everything he needs to know about whatever topic is relevant, kind of just in time learning and stuff. Like I can definitely understand like a computer embodied in kind of like a hologram or something that has like a role, like, oh, I want Mark Twain to be my professor or something like that, right? At the same time, there's a lot of value in just treating the computer like a computer and just saying, you're Google, you do this, go do this now. This is how you get things done, and understanding why the computer does what it does, how it does, like you were saying, like understanding how Google has changed over time. The more understanding you have of the tool, the more you can kind of empathize with the tool and what it's trying to do, and kind of you have that kind of theory of mind for the computer you're interacting with, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think what you're talking about in terms of proactivity is really interesting to me. We can talk more about proactive computing and also contextual computing, which is something I'm super interested in right now, later in this
I've never even heard the
podcast.
term proactive computing. Can you tell me what that is real quick? Just
So, proactive in contextual computing is this idea that very soon we're going to be able to use information that we have about people, like context on, for example, the transcript of this podcast, or like screenshots from your computer, and also like be able to just start doing things for you. I don't like this is starting to get sort of sci-fi, but if you've seen like even like some of the Marvel movies or Her with Joaquin Phoenix and Scarlett
yeah,
Johansson,
excellent
like
movie.
yeah, these are ideas of having AI assistants that are capable of doing things for you without you asking them to do that, which doesn't
Right.
really exist yet. You still have to like hold down and say, "Hey Siri," which I just triggered Siri, but like you have to ask for things still. You have to ask ChatGPT to do XYZ for you. In the next couple of years, I think what we'll start to see is these assistants will like send you a notification and be like, based on the conversation you just had, like XYZ, or like, hey Quincy, I just finished listening to your podcast recording. I edited, these things and I'm ready to upload it when you are. And then you just click like, yes, and then it does it for you. And like sort of automating tasks that you
Hmm.
don't necessarily need to do yourself is something that we can start to see over time. So proactive contextual computing, like really cool.
Yeah.
What you were talking about before though, about programming, I mean, I feel like that's what programming is it's a sort of more human version of machine code. Like it's a way for like levels of abstraction that we're able to use, like something like Python, for example, is like a lot closer to natural language than something like assembly or C. Um, so like I find that really interesting too is the ways in which we're communicating with computers already starting to have more of that natural language element to it, and it'll be interesting to see like what future programming languages look like, um, given that we now have this ability to sort of compile across languages, um, with like large language models and so on,
Yeah.
or at least that will get better and better over time. Something I want to ask you actually is what you sort of think the future of this world looks like, the future of programming, the future of online education, given that we have all of these new opportunities and resources that didn't exist like a year or two ago in the same way, and that are constantly getting faster and more accurate and less
Yeah.
expensive.
Yeah. I mean, I think the vision of the librarian from Snow Crash is pretty apt. It's like a 30-year-old novel maybe. But it's, I mean, given the computing resources, given the amount of instructional designers and teachers and subject matter experts and stuff who would compile their knowledge, the movie Her, which you mentioned, the operating system that is voiced by what's her name?
Scarlett
Scarlett
Johansson, I
Johansson.
think.
Yeah, ScarJo. That is the product of like millions of programmers. They say it like millions of programmers have contributed code that ultimately went into this. And if you think about it, like, a similarly complicated application like Google search, for example, may have at this point hundreds of thousands of contributors that have worked at Google over the years and worked on that, right? So we can see how all this software would get layered on top, and also if you consider all the content being absorbed legally or illegally, we're not going to talk about that debate, but the Common Crawl and every Wikipedia post, every Reddit post, every freeCodeCamp forum post, of which there are hundreds of thousands, being absorbed by GPT, and thus in the great plagiarism engine that is an LLM, basically it could kind of reproduce this. And again, I don't want to act like I don't want people to get the vibe that like, oh, I think one way or another, because my thoughts on it are very nuanced and complicated, and they're still forming. But as a human writer who's written hundreds of articles over the years, I'm probably subconsciously cribbing all kinds of stuff from the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal or the Atlantic or the New Yorker or like all these other publications that I've read over the years, and like different ways of saying things, different ways of thinking. And at what point was that an original thought? You know, who knows? That's almost like a philosophical discussion, though. It's not a programming and computer science question. But
Like,
what
is
you
there
asked
anything
about,
original? Yeah.
yeah, is anything original? Can we have different breakfast flavor cereals, or have we tried them all? Or are they all just variations of the same, few tastes or something? I don't know. But what I will say is, I think the idea of a tutor, a 1-to-1 student ratio, teacher ratio, is pretty amazing. And I think in some cases, a two or three student to one teacher, kind of like if you go to a fancy school like Yale, you probably have like seminar courses where it's a very small number of learners and one professor. And you get that benefit of just being in a small group and having a lot of intelligent people asking questions that maybe you yourself wouldn't have thought to ask around you. That is very good too. So I do think that we're going to continue to have classes where there are, more than one student. But I think a lot of education is going to be with a software system. And let me be clear, freeCodeCamp is a software system. freeCodeCamp's core curriculum is essentially, you could almost say like an AI, in the sense that it's running your code, it's evaluating it, it's returning test information. All the things it says are based on, okay, this condition we didn't meet this condition. And some instructional designer like, Jessica or Naomi or Chris or one of the many people on our instructional design team has come up with like messages that help guide you, almost like Socratic method. Did you mean to leave this, this curly brace out? Or did you mean to not close your loop or something like that, right? Like that's the dream, is asking you questions and guiding you toward the answer that you discover for yourself, because that method of discovery, that moment burns into your memory like what you did wrong. And that's one of the things about programming that's so amazing, is you can sit there with a AI that's been built by thousands of contributors to freeCodeCamp, and you can have an interaction and you can learn programming, and the intelligence of all of those people is kind of like represented in the software that you're using that's guiding you to an understanding of how to write a SQL query or how to write, a Python for loop or something like that, right? So
Yeah.
I think that that's the future. I mean, it's an extremely broad question, but I think that's where things are heading, is just having extremely intelligent systems that people interact with. In addition to, I don't think teachers are going to go away. I do think that classes are going to get smaller. And I think they should get smaller, because there's, the only reason that you go to a public school and there are 40 kids in there with one teacher is it's an economic necessity. For all practical pedagogical reasons, there should be like 3 students in there or 1 student. I think we're heading toward an area where there's such an abundance of resources that anyone who wants to learn anything will be able to probably pull up something that's dedicated to teaching them that specific skill. A lot of that may be video, which is what, your medium has been recently with the video courses, the 3 video courses that you published on freeCodeCamp. And I still think that that's a great mode, even though it's not interactive. People can code along at home, and they can spin up the server, and they can, clone your repo, and they can do that. And that is some degree of interactive, but I really think the gold standard where things are heading, fully interactive, fully like, everything considered by a human teacher who has subject matter expertise. And I do think a lot of people are going to kind of paper over a lot of that human expertise by just like, oh, the AI can do it. But the AI is going to be mediocre, frankly. It's only going to be derivative. It's not going to have the kind of flashes of insight that a human teacher has, in my humble opinion. And maybe eventually it will, but we have no idea how soon that will come to be. And we may be stuck in this paradigm, and people may think things are going like this, but they may actually be doing step changes, and we just experienced a step change. So sorry, this is not the Let's Interview Quincy Larson podcast. I did not mean to just talk for a really long time, but I think a great deal about these things, and I know you do too. What do you think?
Yeah. I mean, well, first of all, like, that's why I came on the podcast, is I wanted to hear your thoughts about all of this. I think that you're absolutely right that things are going to become more personalized, more generative, um, and then like what you were saying about like interactive, gamified. Like I think things are going to become more gamified in the same way that like right now I use Duolingo like
Yeah.
every day. Um, and you can debate how like effective that is at teaching you like a language. I use it as a supplement because I'm also taking a language course. So it's
Hmm.
just like it makes me feel good about myself to like do the Duolingo every day. But it's really effective at getting me to do it every day. I'm at like a,
Yeah.
more than a year streak at this point. Um, and I think that that kind of sort of like dopamine pushing um, like structure to a course could be like very effective in getting people to get through those in a way that's also like more fun. Like for example, like I took a bunch of courses online that were like for credit for school, and those courses were structured in a way where they were you would watch like 3 hours worth of videos and do like 20 pages worth of readings or something, and then you would answer a 10-question quiz, and then you would repeat. And to
Yeah.
me, that just feels like maybe not the
It's a
most
missed opportunity, man. Is it?
like what if the questions were sort of interspersed throughout all of that material so that you were being checked on how you understood it as you were going through it versus like right all at the end. Like I think structurally our education system hasn't changed a lot in a really long time, and this is an opportunity to sort of revisit like first principles, like
Yeah.
what is the purpose of education? How is like what is the most effective way to learn? And that could be different for different people. I mean, I personally find it a lot more entertaining and enjoyable to work on projects like when I'm trying to learn a CS course, I prefer CS courses that you like you were discussing where I'm spinning up an environment and like doing something in real time while I'm watching the video
Yeah.
versus like just like watching a lecture for 10 hours and then doing something. But someone else might prefer the latter. So it's like what's really nice too is that there's a level of personalization that exists within auditing in the sense that you can just pick what's better for you and then do that. You sort of get to pick and choose and build your own curriculum. And something that Sam and I spent a lot of time thinking about was this idea of like pathways that you
Hmm.
could create your own, that it didn't really, auditing didn't stop after you finished one course. Then it became about, okay, now what course do I pick? And then what course do I audit? And what's really cool is that those courses can be from completely different places. You don't
Yeah.
have to
You're
go
not
through
limited to just
MIT's.
one school. You're.
Exactly.
I mean, there are 5,000 universities just in the U.S. Right. I mean, frankly, a lot of those are nothing to write home about. But even if you look at like really good universities, there's still hundreds of them, and they have different professors who have different expertise in different subjects. And there's a good chance that there are maybe like just a small handful of universities that teach a given topic that you're really interested in. So by being able to audit, you can draw from all of them, and you can have the ultimate level of customization, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So you think that building tooling around these pathways, which I've been very interested in. The first project I built once I, learned coding was basically after I'd worked as a software engineer for a while, and I wanted to build my own first big project. Was basically that it would strap together a whole lot of different courses and books, and depending on what you wanted to learn and what you knew, and it would you'd sign in with LinkedIn. It would read all your LinkedIn information, including back then they had like these skills, and you could have people like rank you for different or rate you for different skills. Oh, I think Quincy knows SQL. Sure, why not? And so you get like 99 people that like all think that Quincy knows SQL. Do you remember that on LinkedIn when they used to have the skills and it'd be like, but anyway, it would pull in your LinkedIn. I know I'm dating myself. And then it would just use that as the basis, like, oh, okay, so you want to go from what you know now to working in, business intelligence, right? Or using like Power BI and different tools like that to like crunch charts and figure out where to prioritize resources and stuff like that, right? Like, so, okay, well, then you should read this book. You should take this course. And by the way, there's like a critical path of dependencies, essentially. Like, you need to know this field of mathematics in order to do this type of programming. You need to know this type of programming in order to, use this type of software or something like that. So there'd be like a dependency chain, and it would work backward, and it would create kind of like a list of courses you should take. But to some extent, like, how do you know those are the right courses? You could build like a big engine, and you could have like a whole bunch of people rating them.
The challenges,
like that. Yeah.
I think like if I were to do this in a more structured way, like not at my university, there's a lot of people who have already like made like public GitHub repositories doing exactly this, where they're like, okay, I did like this course and then this course and then this course, and this is how I felt about it. And I would probably check out a couple of those before like embarking on something as like sort of time consuming, and like commitment level I think is also for a long-term path a little bit higher than just like picking one course.
Yeah.
But it's also like to some extent there's no commitment, right? Like I think there's a lot of things I've bookmarked in my Chrome tabs where it's like, I want to read this article one day, or like, I don't know if you have Pocket, for example. I've saved so many articles to Pocket that I've never read. So I think that that's also a challenge, is like, how do you get from that crucial point of, that looks interesting, at some point I want to read this article or watch this video, and my YouTube watch later thing is like 400 videos that are like, a lot of them are free CodeCamp courses.
I have to go and clear them out periodically because it just becomes meaningless. Like I just have this big heap of undifferentiated things that at one point I thought were a good idea to consume, And
I think like that's a good resource to have available. And so the question then becomes like, how do you sort of flip the switch, go from 0 to 1 of like, okay, I added this to something I want to do. How do I actually start doing it? And that is often like really just a matter of like personal drive to do something, like how excited you are about it. Like if you're feeling like something is a chore, or it's not something that you like, you're doing it for like because you think you should instead of because you want to, it's a lot harder to do it. And so at that point it's maybe a good idea to like reflect on just like, why am I doing this? Which is certainly something I've done in the past as well.
Well, maybe, I mean, you're somebody who has probably a pretty good information diet. I would imagine you're, pursuing your computer science degree at Yale. Maybe we could talk a little bit about going to Yale and what inspired you to go there. Because, I know that you probably got into lots of universities, including a lot of engineering universities like Caltech. What inspired you specifically to go to kind of a stodgy old Northeastern liberal arts college instead of going to like
college?
Yeah.
I mean, so I chose to go to Yale over schools that are perhaps like better known for engineering or computer science programs on the West Coast, because I like also like really love a lot of the liberal arts classes. Like there's a lot of like smaller things that added up to it. But I would say the big thing is, I personally believe that a computer science curriculum is pretty standardized across all colleges.
Yeah.
Like it's the same data structures, it's the same algorithms. You're not learning like necessarily like a novel, binary tree or something if you choose to go to an engineering school to the same extent. And a lot of the curriculum here is also like adapted from other schools, and they like do acknowledge that as well often.
So it's a good enough CS program, but it also has everything else that you get from attending a liberal arts school, and philosophy and epistemology and different topics like that, right?
Computer science rankings, if you go to like csrankings.org, I don't remember which website it is, but there's a lot of websites that like keep track of like CS rankings in the United States. Those are based on two things, which are also kind of the same thing, which is the amount of research that gets output by that university,
which has nothing to do with teaching quality.
Field. Yes, which is absolutely no, like, at least in my experience, like, research, being a really good researcher does not mean you're a good professor. And so like a school like CMU, for example, is very high up on there because they just have an insane number of CS faculty. And it is objectively just an incredible school to go to for computer science. It's super rigorous. It's a great program. But like I think as an undergrad, like for me at least, having like the highest CS ranking wasn't the most important thing to me. Like I also spent a lot of time thinking about like the experience of being a student there. And I'm not talking specifically about any one school here versus any one other school. And I think that's a personal decision that a lot of people have to make for themselves. For me, at least, like I always thought I was going to go to an engineering school back in high school. And it was literally like I went to the pre-orientation days for Yale and I met some awesome people. And I realized like that was just where I wanted to spend the next 4 years. And so it wasn't really about computer science, I guess, was my answer, which I don't know if that's necessarily like a satisfying answer.
Yeah.
But
well, I mean, that makes sense if you look at like computer science curricula as like it meets a certain threshold of quality and then it doesn't have to be the absolute best. I think people get preoccupied with optimizing for one dimension when really you want your little character pentagon to like, be more three-dimensional, I guess.
I mean, like, I think it matters a lot more for like master's programs, grad school. Like, certainly then I would spend a lot of time considering, okay, like, what is this? But then even then, it's not really about the school. It's about the specific PI that you're doing research with.
PI.
Principal investigator, like the main
principal investigator. Okay, I didn't even know that acronym. Okay,
it's like the main person in the lab who like that could be at any school, and often it's schools that you like wouldn't necessarily like. A school like Yale or Harvard might not be the best school for a particular area of research, and so then it really is a lot more about like doing your research on what kind of I guess research you want to be doing, and then rankings, I guess, within computer science are more likely to correlate to like the school that you're going to do research at. But that's not really something I spent a lot of time considering for undergrad, if that makes sense.
So just to kind of recap what you just said, like first of all, CS programs are more similar than they are different generally. If you're going to like a state university or if you're going to a good private university like Yale. And you can consider other things like the campus experience. I mean, you're getting to live on a, 300, 400-year-old campus. I don't know how old Yale is. It's pretty old.
It's more than three. Like, it was founded in, I think, 1701. So older than the U.S. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're getting to like, and they probably literally got ivy on some of the buildings. It's part of the Ivy League. So I can imagine that experience. And also you're from the South, right? Like I am. You're from Florida and getting to live up there in, is it in New England?
It's in New Haven, yeah.
Yeah, I'm lying a lot of my ignorance about the Northeast. I've never lived up there. But
it's about like an hour and 50-minute train from New York City. So yeah, it's in Connecticut. I grew up in South Florida, never lived in the Northeast or anywhere there was snow or it got cold. So this is a total shock to me as well.
Did you have one of those experiences like, oh, my first time seeing snow? Do you remember that?
I did have a magical experience the first time it snowed here. Yeah, it was, it doesn't snow that often, unfortunately, which like other people are like, yay. And I'm like, I want more snow. But that's just the like inner child in me, I guess.
Yeah.
I think that what I would say is I've never been a student at a state university. So I can't compare. Like I've never been a student at other schools. So I can't tell you that X school, I can't tell you they're exactly the same. I can't tell you that they're similar. I can just say based on like my perception of things, I'm very happy with how all of this stuff sort of correlates. I do know that I have friends at schools that are like for example, like at Stanford, where they do have like courses that Yale doesn't offer in some areas. Like there's definitely the core curriculum is very often very similar, but then there's like elective classes that are really awesome if you go to a school that's a lot more focused on computer science, for example. But then, there's pros and cons with everything. So that would sort of be my breakdown of computer science at different universities.
And I'll just say, like, a lot of people watching this or listening to this are probably thinking like, why are they talking about university? Like I'm like in my 30s, I'm in my 40s. I don't care about universities. Move on to something interesting, Quincy. But I take university courses all the time. Like I audit courses. I'm a 43-year-old dude, right? Like, why am I doing this? Because I like learning, and I think that it's like a huge competitive edge that so many other people are, sedentary and like, oh, I'm just gonna tune out and like watch Netflix or something, and I'm sitting here learning as much as I can, right? Anyone can benefit from the courses that Yale is publishing online, right? And like certainly I've taken a lot of Stanford courses, computer science courses over the years, because I just studied at a state school and I don't have a computer science degree. I actually have a degree in English, right? Because I was an English teacher. So just because we're talking about universities and you may be past university age, don't completely tune out of this section, because there's a lot to be learned and a lot of the benefit of having all these great teachers in one place teaching courses and being able to publish them on the internet. Like, we can reap the benefits of that too, even if we're in our 30s and 40s. And if you're somebody who's high school age and you're considering going to get a university degree, we've got the guy who created College Compendium right here. Maybe you could give some advice to people who are like, just some quick advice to people who are younger, like, maybe 16-ish, thinking about what they're going to do in the future, whether they should go to university. Do you think people should still go to university?
I mean, I'm biased because I am currently at university. I think like there's a lot of factors that go into that decision. And like some of them are personal, some of them are family, some of them are financial, some of them are like what your goals are to do long term in life. I think that going to university opens a lot of doors. Like, having a university degree does help you get a job after the fact, especially in computer science. But you don't necessarily like need to do that. There's no like one path in life.
Yeah.
And you certainly don't have to go to any one school. There's like this idea, I think, in high school that like there's like this track. Like, they definitely push you in high school to apply to college as like sort of the next path. And like for a lot of people that is the right choice. And for some people it's not. And that's like a personal choice you kind of have to make. But certainly what I would say is like it's worth it to learn computer science, regardless of if you're doing either of those things. Like, I think that a lot of the computer science that I learned before coming to Yale. And it wasn't like in a high school classroom necessarily either. It was through platforms like freeCodeCamp, like SoloLearn, like Khan Academy.
SoloLearn being a mobile app that people use sometimes to supplement freeCodeCamp. I've talked with the founder.
Yeah, there's literally a million amazing free resources to learn, like literally anything you want to learn, not just in computer science, but like in any field, like available already on the web. And so I think it really just boils down to like, what are you interested in learning about, and then actually pursuing that. Like, something that I've learned recently is there's actually a Wikipedia app. And this Wikipedia app will just show you information about all kinds of historical events that happened on like today, like each day. And it's just sort of like a simple random way too that you can just discover a lot more knowledge than you like previously had. And so like I think if you're a curious person, there's a lot of resources like that exist that are free.
And even if you're not that curious, it's a supplement to your curiosity. Because I wouldn't necessarily think to learn about, for example, the Tower of Knowledge. I was in Pittsburgh, and there's this university that built this. They wanted to have like an educational skyscraper. And it was so intriguing to me, like, what's the Tower of Knowledge? Like, I never would have thought that, but I just happened to be reading like the Wikipedia article for Pittsburgh, and it just mentioned that. And I was like, oh, what's that? And I like learned all about this fascinating structure, the tallest educational building in the world, basically built maybe like 30 or 40 years ago, maybe 50 years ago. But it's like so intriguing. And, you know, this information will just come to you if you keep your antennas out. I'm hoping that at least some of the things that you're hearing just here on this podcast inspire you to go and learn more about topics. One topic, though, that we do want to talk about absolutely is ethics. And everybody's eyes are probably glazing over, oh my goodness, AI ethics and machine learning, right? Like most computer science programs, and we did like a survey of the top, 50 or so computer science program. Most computer science programs, this was part of us essentially assembling the FreeCodeCamp University degree program and figuring out what to teach to whom. And Sam Crombie was also involved in this effort, and huge thanks to him. We're going to have him on the podcast in the near future as well. But essentially, ethics is completely undertaught, in my humble opinion. It's almost kind of like a punchline, a joke, like, oh, business ethics, as though there are any ethics in something as cutthroat as business, right? Or AI ethics, as though computer scientists really care about that. But actually, a lot of people do care about AI ethics, and there are a ton of ethical considerations. And it's not just thinking in terms of like, what does it mean to be a good AI, right? A lot of it is there's real world risk because these models are being deployed. And you just created this entire 2-hour course about it. And unfortunately, it was like one of your least popular courses just because I think there's not a lot of interest in ethics. But maybe you could use this moment to kind of like give people an idea of why ethics is important for programmers and computer scientists, especially when they're working with AI models.
I think I would frame the course as sort of everything you need to know to have like a conversation about AI. Like maybe like half the course is about ethics. A lot of the course is also about just like what a neural network is and like how to talk about a lot of these philosophical questions that are really interesting about artificial intelligence and which like make for interesting conversations, like the black and white room experiment or the Chinese room experiment is another famous one. The ethical questions are also there and also important. And I think the reason they're important is because of the just sheer impact that these tools that we're building have. Like we have what's really amazing about computer science, like in my opinion, the thing that I think is the coolest about learning to code is the fact that you can like make a website or make an app or make some application, something with code that it impacts literally every person in the world who has internet or like who has access to that.
Yeah, I mean, you can push FreeCodeCamp and anybody can open any device that has a browser and they can go there and they can consume that instantly.
And that's just insane. Like that is amazing and something that like is by far to me the coolest thing about like any of programming or the internet is just the sheer level of impact you're able to have. Like if I taught I did teach this class, this AI ethics and machine learning course that I taught for FreeCodeCamp. I taught it to a small group of like 20 high school students before that. And I spent a lot of time teaching them this course. And I'm sure like it was really cool to have that experience of teaching this like in person. But maximum 20 people can ever experience that versus like theoretically anyone who wants to. You, the viewer, can watch this video course if you're interested. And that's really special to me. But what it also means is that whatever you say in that course, whatever you put in that website or application or how it's designed, even if you're like not really thinking about it or it's accidental or it's incidental, it can have a really big impact because there's like a butterfly effect for really small things that are like really, really dangerous at scale. That's why like programming and design of good programming, it's really important to think about, for example, like when you're taking a class on data structures, that things run in like, O of 1 or O of n time. Like you want your time complexity to be low, not because it really matters when things are small, but because it really matters when things are big. And you can apply that same idea or principle to AI applications and deploying them in real world environments. Like if you're building a self-driving car.
We should definitely talk about this because Cruise has been in the news. And apologies to anybody who works at Cruise, but like that company was a total disaster based on what I've read about it. Like I've never seen, that's hyperbole. I've seen very few companies that are so flippant with safety. I mean, it's amazing. But just to give you some context, I heard that in this report that was conducted, and one of the reasons Cruise is no longer in operation and may not ever be in operation again.
I did not know that.
Yeah,
Really?
they took all the cars off the road after billions and billions of dollars in investment.
In San Francisco, right?
Yeah. So what happened was a woman was like bumped by a car, hit by a car, or whatever. She flew over into the path of the Cruise car, and the Cruise car basically dragged her for like 20 or 30 feet while it was trying to pull over. Because that was what its programming was, is like, oh, there's been an accident. I need to pull over. So it's dragging this woman who's in critical condition now. I think she did live. But you can imagine how like some decision like, oh, if there's an accident, just pull over. There's no consideration for like, what if somebody's like right in front of the car, or like, well, you know, how can you be sure? I think that they probably had sensors in place to know whether somebody was being dragged. Like, oh, that's weird. We're like driving really slow, or is the parking brake engaged or something? I don't know. But it came out that like their AI system had difficulty identifying small children, and yet they were in production. Like the cars were on the road. So you can imagine like if they hadn't been pulled, lots of kids might have gotten hit by these cars.
I mean, like they weren't just on the road, Quincy. I rode in one. Like the last time I was in San Francisco, I've been in a self-driving Cruise. Like literally like got in one. I'm sitting in the back. There's like a panel in between you and the wheel, and it's just going on its own.
Yeah.
That was a pretty crazy experience. It was really funny because we were trying to go from one like location to a location that was maybe like 5 blocks away, and it did the most circuitous route it possibly could have. Like I think it was like a 40-minute ride for like something that could have been like a 10-minute ride.
Yeah,
but I think it's maybe
which makes sense. Sometimes you look at Google Maps and you're like, why is it taking me all the way over there? Well, it's just the software is not perfect, right?
I think San Francisco taxi driver would be like, a lot of SF has a lot of really like difficult roads that I think they just try to avoid in general. So that is my assumption for why it.
Don't ever drive on the street.
Yeah, the really windy one. So all that to say, like I definitely think like that is a very obvious example of how like an autonomous vehicle, which granted is a really difficult thing to program.
Yeah.
Yes, like it, you know, obviously that's a really bad situation that they should have been pulled for, but it's also like it's a very difficult thing to build a self-driving car.
Absolutely, 100% agreed.
That is perfect right out of the gate. And I guess like the thing of AI safety, AI ethics, it is important because it doesn't matter as much when they're really, really small numbers of those cars on the road, just in like one city, right?
Yeah, but when you scale it up, like the time complexity, scale it up, you have millions of people taking rides.
It starts to get a lot more dangerous.
Yeah.
And even though, like, in theory, self-driving cars could already be safer than human drivers, there's all of these, like, complex questions about accountability, like who's responsible when things go wrong. Like, if it's a human driver, we know who's in the wrong, always. Like, it's one of the drivers for the most part.
Yeah.
But when there's a self-driving car involved, it adds all of this extra complexity that we haven't really figured out yet, to my knowledge, like, how that's going to work. And so there's like a lot still left, I guess.
Yeah, there's a lot of real world encroaching on this beautiful engineering problem, isn't there?
Yeah, I mean, because the real world is complicated, and like in a perfect world, autonomous vehicles could probably be ready to like drive like today.
Yeah.
The difficulty is human drivers and human pedestrians are like really difficult to predict. Like some guy might just fall asleep and swerve into the car, or like some pedestrian might decide they're going to make a run for it across the street, even though the cars are going and it's a red light for them, because that's what humans do. And it's really difficult for cars to predict all of those possible outcomes and then also make the choice that like saves the most number of people, or like, or protects the. Do you protect the person in the car at all costs? Do you protect the most number of people? There's all kinds of interesting questions as well within that, like that can be thought about, I think, in interesting ways. And I actually don't think the trolley problem is that interesting of a question here.
Yeah, I don't either, but I do some of these things. And or you have to choose whether you want to just leave the switch alone, in which case this train is going to go and kill 5 people, or if you want to hit the switch, in which case this train is going to deroute and it's going to go kill 1 person. But when you do that, when you hit that switch, technically you're sentencing that person to death, right? Whereas in action, you can kind of like, oh, it wasn't me. But so it's kind of like a philosophical question. But one thing that I loved about the webcomic is how people imagine it, and it's them standing at the switch trying to decide what to do, and how it actually is going to be when like things are deployed at scale and you've got all these systems making these decisions, is you're one of the people on the track and somebody else is making the decision, or some AI engineer has already kind of made the decision in the code as to what's supposed to happen in this situation, and you're the one who's going to die for their decision. That's one of the reasons that ethics is so important, is because we want to make sure software engineers who are designing these systems, like self-driving cars, care about it and think things through and have a framework for, dealing with the messy reality, the complexity of reality.
Yeah. And I mean, like, these things are also, like, not everything is life and death, but since we're on the topic of life and death, like, to elaborate on my major, and why I came to Yale, actually, Yale is one of the best schools in the world for specifically politics and, like, geopolitics, international politics.
Mm-hmm.
And my full major is computer science and global affairs. So I do some work in the intersection of those things.
Mm-hmm.
And like over the last year, I've done some work in like AI policy area, and I had the opportunity to learn a lot about a lot of the things that people consider like existential risk. Like, what are like some of the really dangerous things that exist within AI that you actually should be scared about as someone who lives in a free democracy?
Yeah.
Whether that's potential micro targeting that could influence elections in the next 6 to 12 months, or even something like a bioweapon that is like another COVID that could be easily created by some of these models.
Yeah, AI is speeding up drug discovery, but it's also speeding up discovery of other things that you don't necessarily want to discover.
Exactly. Like, there's like sort of it's such a powerful tool, and like all tools, it's, like a hammer. You can use it for good or you can use it for evil. And we have to like do our best to make sure that these tools are deployed in ways that are like ethically responsible and like don't harm the human race like as much as possible. And not everything is like about like the singularity, like this idea, like, oh no, like AI
that gets all the headlines. I mean, a lot of people, but you and I don't think we've ever talked about the singularity in our many conversations.
No, I don't think we have.
I don't think we've ever talked about Skynet taking over the world and killing everybody.
Not everything is movies. Like, I think the real world ways in which AI is applied are also really important and less discussed. For example, in hiring and in recruiting. Like, AI is examining resumes as like a first pass now in a lot of places. And there's a lot of studies. For example, there was a study that Amazon had where like they were using AI in their recruiting process, and it was in some way discriminating against different groups of people without like people really even realizing it. Because the problem with AI systems in general, and this is like a problem that you can really boil down almost all of AI's problems into, from an ethical question, is that they're black boxes, which is to say we really don't understand in a lot of cases why they make the decisions they do. And we also don't therefore have a way to like just we can't argue with an AI when it makes a decision if we don't know why.
We can't even ask it why it made the decision it did, and it might just lie.
So if an AI says,
it may not understand why it made the decision it made. It might just come up with some kind of like post facto like story to like, oh, I gave you this recommendation because what can I say here that'll sound plausible? You know?
Well, it's like when you use ChatGPT, right, to do math. It's actually pretty good at doing math now or writing code.
Mm-hmm.
But that's because it's like also like calling a specific function to like run math problems and code that part of it versus just doing it using what it was originally doing when you first launched ChatGPT, which was just like the same sort of text generation it was always doing. And that's because there was like a lack of understanding of what the math actually represented. Like you can think of these AI models, specifically within the large language model context, as like really, 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 really good autocomplete. And it's really good, like almost like it's magical almost, until it isn't. And the more you use it, the more you realize that there's sometimes like a lack of understanding that's really critical. And that problem is getting resolved in multiple different ways. Like it's way more accurate now than it was when it originally launched.
Yeah.
But it's also something where you can liken it. There's a really great article that was written by the author of this book, Clara and the Sun, I think, or maybe
Clara
it
and the
was
Sun.
maybe it was the Overstory. I'm not 100% sure which author wrote it.
Yeah,
I had to
just
read
give
it
me the
for
link to
a
that, and I'll add that
class.
to the video description / podcast show notes.
Yeah, it was about how ChatGPT is kind of a blurry JPEG of the internet.
Yes, I
And I
read
don't know
that. I read that. That's a really
You read
cool
that? You read this article? Yeah, great article. Because it's also super accurate,
compressed,
I think.
lossy.
Yeah, it's a loss. It's not a lossless program, and so what you're seeing when it autocompletes is kind of like it trying to like recreate the space between, and sometimes it does that well, and sometimes it doesn't, and that is also what's happening in a lot of these cases with AI models making decisions where we are trying to like understand how they're coming to those conclusions and we don't always understand that.
Yeah.
And so like when it comes to AI policy, AI ethics, AI safety, it covers so many different things, right? From deepfakes to disinformation to this like existential risk of bioweaponry to
Or just more mundane stuff like really empowering scammers. Like AI you can scam at scale now in a way that you could never do if you had like a call center of scammers
it's
operating.
really good at writing spam. It's really good at helping people like
Cheat on their
plagiarize.
Yeah.
Because it's hard to detect and there are ways of circumventing the AI detection algorithms that exist. And so
AI is very bad at detecting AI. Any AI, if you're a school, if you're like a chief information officer at like a university and somebody's trying to sell you AI plagiarism detection software, run the other way. That stuff does not work. Everybody I've talked to says it's basically a crapshoot and it's just a cash grab. Like, because
I wouldn't describe it as a cash grab.
Okay.
But I would describe it as a cat and mouse game where like each of them are like constantly getting better at fighting the other thing in the same way that like a vaccine or like a medicine, over time the pathogens learn to resist the medicine and you have to come up with a new, stronger,
I
or
mean,
different
that may
medicine.
be the case, but in the case of GPT-4, people ran a bunch of academics ran a bunch of tests on GPT-4 and said like, hey, was this content generated by GPT-4? And even the most powerful LLM ever created could not reliably detect AI generated text. So it makes me
it
think
depends
that,
on how deep you want to get into that, but there's like
Okay.
a couple things they're using to actually detect that.
maybe
'cause
let's go deeper into that because I'm very interested in that as a teacher and somebody who talks with teachers all the time and tries to. You don't want to have false positives where you're blaming your students for plagiarizing when they didn't. It's much better, was it Ben Franklin that said, I'd rather like 99 men go free than guilty men go free than one innocent man, face execution or something like that, right? Like you want to err on the side of caution and you don't want to because it's incredibly demoralizing and disruptive to people when they're taking like some sort of exam and like you've been flagged as a cheater by this AI or people submit an essay and their teacher's like, yeah, it looks like it was plagiarized, but you didn't plagiarize. Can you imagine how maddening that would be? You worked your butt off to like create this term paper and some algorithm written by some, ed tech company, education technology company is like, oh, we feel 95% confidence interval that you cheated. And like now your academic record is tainted just because somebody did a bad job of coding software. Yeah, I mean, maybe you can talk about the state of plagiarism detection.
Yeah, I mean, so I think you're right. Like all of this is really boils down to type 1 and type 2 error, which is, if you're not familiar with statistics, false positives and false negatives.
Right.
And actually, that's not just the issue at hand for plagiarism detection. That's the issue at hand for all AI stuff. Like all of these questions of like, for example, like, do you want more of like what are you trying to select for? What is worse? Like, would you rather have someone not get hired because the AI screwed up, or would you rather have the AI like select for this thing over some other situation? Um, there's like a lot of complexity that
Yeah.
exists when you're trying to deal with systems that are really, really, really
Black boxy.
like yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
there's no. It's like
so
this is the fundamental problem in AI of interpretability. Like, how did the AI come to this conclusion? And because it's an inscrutable neural network, we
well,
don't
people are
really
working
know.
on this. This is something that's getting a lot better
Yeah,
already. Like this is because it is such a big important thing that
yeah.
a
We
lot of
we
research
have
is
a
currently going
course.
into interpretability. And it is
Yeah,
something that does exist for some models. So it's not correct to say that like no AI is understandable. AIs,
yeah, yeah,
they're
yeah. And
definitely
I
now
just want to
building AI
clarify.
systems that we can understand.
Yeah, that was
Um,
hyperbole. So real quick, we have a course called No Black Box AI,
yeah.
taught by Radu, Dr. Radu, computer science professor from I think Finland. Don't don't blame me, Radu, if I can't remember exactly where you're from. But he basically teaches you how to build an AI where you can understand what's going on. But my understanding of the state of the art is inscrutable systems, black box systems, and you AI that we can actually understand how it's making decisions. Interpretable AI systems are so far behind, and most people are just going to go with the most powerful option. They're gonna go with GPT-4 instead of some other system where they can necessarily tease out exactly what's done. And in some cases, you will want a system where you can do that, but there's always going to be the temptation to grab the much more powerful tool that's harder to understand. And just for context, the YouTube recommendation engine that recommends free CodeCamp videos to people, we don't know how it works, and we've talked with engineers from YouTube, and they don't necessarily know how it works either. They're like,
It's really good though.
why
Like
do people
it
click on
recommends
like
things
a
for me all the
20-hour
time.
course? Yeah, it works great,
Yeah.
but I
I
mean, it
see something
always
and I'm
serves me
like,
stuff
that's
that I want to
exactly what I
watch.
wanted to watch. Yeah.
Yeah,
So I mean, I worked on to elaborate on what I meant before. I took an NLP class
yeah,
last
natural language
spring.
processing.
Um, and for my like final project in that class, I tried to do some research and work on making AI like ChatGPT generated text undetectable by a lot of the biggest AI detection software. Like I think like Originality AI is one of them.
Mm-hmm.
Turnitin.com is another.
Turn it
GPT-0 is
in. It
another.
predates AI stuff. They've
Yeah.
long been in that industry of like detecting cheating,
Um,
which
so anyway, my
again I'm a skeptic of. If you can't guess, I'm very critical of that industry, and I think it produces a lot of false positives. People who are well-meaning who did not cheat, who suffer consequences because they were incorrectly labeled as a cheater.
well, my goal here was to see if it was possible to do that, and also then like how that sort of worked. So basically, there's two things that AI detection software typically looks at.
Yes.
The two like areas. One of them is called perplexity, like a perplexity score.
Yeah. Maybe you
And that
can explain what that
basically
is.
it's like how well language models can like predict the word sequences that an AI model will generate because like they are derivative and therefore like when we talk about like uniqueness, we kind of
Hmm.
glossed over this earlier about you were saying like, is there anything truly unique? Well, it's hard to say, But it is true that with AI models, like you're able to end up with the same output if you give it the same exact input and other like very specific details. So like
Yeah, I mean, it might
ChatGPT
be
will
like
give you the
slightly
same answer
differently
every
worded,
time.
but the general thrust is similar. Unless you crank
And
up the
so
temperature.
yes, but like I guess what I'm saying is an AI model, like I sort of said before, ChatGPT is just really, 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 really good autocomplete.
Mm-hmm.
Theoretically, what it's doing literally all of the time is just trying to predict the best next word based on the previous input sequence of words.
Yes.
And so in theory, you could do sort of a reverse of that and figure out like, okay, what was the most probable sequence of words? And then if that matches what the student inputted, then there's a high chance that they used AI for that. That's one thing. The other like thing that they measure is called burstiness.
Burstiness. Like to
Burstiness.
burst, to explode, kind of burstiness.
Kind of. It basically means like repetition of phrases, but also like when a human writes, we don't write sentences of equal length or like
Mm-hmm.
like we usually write some short sentences followed by some longer run-on sentences followed by short. Like humans don't write perfect sentences,
Okay.
perfect paragraphs.
So
AI does.
a burst of fire from a an automatic weapon. Sorry to use that analogy, but that's what I think of when I think of a burst in terms of
Well, it's
words.
kind of like it's like a
burst of words.
similarity score. Yeah, it's like a similarity score between like sections or between like different pieces. And so those two things combined are how like something like GPT-0 would detect. To my understanding, to be clear, like I didn't work on their tools, so I'm not 100% sure. But I sort of look at that as two like statistics that people use to measure um how likely it is that text is AI generated. And the challenge here is, as you said before, AI is just getting better and better. And GPT-4 writes text that's way more realistic than any of the previous
Yeah.
versions of. And also, like, we have open source models now, like Llama, like Mistral, that are getting better and better. That will, like, eventually, I think we're going to see sort of a, like, model parity or almost like, there will be a baseline level of quality across
Yeah.
these models
Like
that's
with
very high.
computer science programs at U.S. universities. Yeah.
Well, because one of the challenges
models are going to
is
be good enough.
humans are not that good at English. Also, like a lot of us, like I write sentences with bad grammar all the time. Like, and I'm a college student. If you're like trying to detect plagiarism in like an elementary or middle or high school setting, like the average middle schooler probably isn't writing like grade A essays. And so it's going to be really hard to tell in a lot of those cases, like, is that actually something they wrote? Because even if they make like a couple tweaks, it almost asks the question, like, do we need to change the way in which writing this tool that has been around forever, is that still the best system for, like what is the purpose of writing?
Yeah.
It's to sort of help you like check that you understand what you're talking about. And so the problem is that like if you use AI to write your essay for you, that doesn't actually prove that you understand the thing. Like the
Right.
process of writing is a process of revision and editing, and it has the same outcome, which is you turn in this paper, but it
Yeah.
doesn't
I mean,
have
the
the
actual
same.
deliverable is a piece of paper with words on it, even though the process that I go through as somebody who's not cheating is read a bunch of articles, synthesize that into an outline,
Well, it's synthesized.
expand that
Yeah.
outline into an article. Whereas, a person who's cheating would be like, hey, I need to write a term paper on XYZ. Write me a 500 word, 10,000 word
So
essay on this.
if you want to hear a fun story about
Yeah.
AI plagiarism, and then we can move on from this topic.
Yeah. I mean, I could talk about this all day, but I don't know about the
So-
audience if they really care that much about it.
So one of the things I learned when I was working on some of this last year, was, have you heard of Unicode lookalikes?
Unicode lookalikes, yes. So Unicode characters, there are thousands of them. Every Chinese character, every Arabic letter, every English character, and then like emojis, stuff like that. And sometimes you'll find characters that look very similar. That like, is that period actually a period, or what language period is that? Because like Japanese periods look different than English periods and stuff like that. So characters that look very similar to the human eye, but actually have different Unicode values. Is that correct?
That's exactly it.
Okay,
And
great.
what's really interesting is this has been fixed at this point because they realized that this was a huge vulnerability, these plagiarism detection softwares. But something you used to be able to do was you could just write something in ChatGPT and then Control F for like every instance of the letter E or the letter A or something, and then replace it with a Unicode lookalike of the letter E or the letter A. And it would like completely make it like the burstiness and perplexity scores would just explode because in terms of like how unlikely it is that it was AI generated, because AI doesn't generate text with Unicode lookalikes. That's like such a unique character because they're not trained on text with that stuff. And like AI is not actually looking at like the letter, it's looking at like the machine representation of the letter, right? So that in itself, I guess, like
and
really
AI
threw it
would
off for a
never
while.
swap out the E for like some IPA, like International Phonetic Alphabet equivalent E or something like that looks the
thing is,
same.
a human probably wouldn't do that either, and so they figured that out, and
So essentially,
that's kind of
that
been
was
patched
like
at this point.
that was like an exploit.
That was an
There was a
exploit that doesn't
vulnerability.
exist
It was
anymore.
exploited.
Yeah.
That was probably closed, hopefully, by the AI detection industrial complex. And as a result, people are having to move on to different attacks, just like any sort of security vulnerability would be patched. Like they're, Apple discovers
That's
that you can do
why,
XYZ to crack a phone, and suddenly, they've got a fix for it in the next release, auto-downloaded, and we move on, and people keep trying to discover these, and you've got all these security researchers. So it's a similar kind of arms race to what we have with any other security consideration.
I mean, so like still in the vein of like talking about AI's use cases within, an education system, but not necessarily in the same context of plagiarism. But I suppose it could be viewed as that, is that like AI also writes really good code.
Yes.
Really, really good code. In a lot of cases. It's really good at debugging your code. It's really good at figuring out like what exactly is going wrong in a memory leak. It's really good at understanding error messages. And there's all kinds of new tools that exist now because of that, like GitHub Copilot and Cursor, if you've used Cursor.
I've heard good things about it.
Yeah, there's a lot of, and even VS Code has integrations now for that. So if you're like a developer, chances are you've seen this stuff or you've used this stuff. And you also can use AI to write a lot of your code. Like there's a lot of code that exists that's boilerplate. There's a lot of code that exists that is like writing a React function or something, like a hook. Like this is something that you do a lot. It's replicable. There's a lot of training data for it. And so it like begs these questions of how should this be used in production settings, and how can it like improve our workflows. And I'm actually very optimistic and positive about this because I think it's going to do, I'm not worried about AI necessarily replacing a programmer anytime soon because of complexity across like entire projects. Like AI is very good at writing one file, 2 files, 3 files. It's not yet capable, at least I haven't seen it be capable, of like writing an entire full stack project from scratch. Like
maybe extremely simple proof of concept type applications.
Yes,
but
like maybe something simple, a simple game that people have made a million tutorials for, maybe a website. It's not going to be able to build some crazy like full stack application by itself in one go without someone who actually understands code and can connect the dots. And so the way that I see this sort of playing out, at least for me and my use of this, has been use it to write like a function or two or help me understand what's going wrong within the code. So you can be like a 10x developer in terms of the speed of your code output. But you still have to have like this sort of higher level understanding of how you're connecting all of these pieces so that you build like software that compiles and runs when you're talking about these really large projects with like 50 plus files. Because like speaking honestly, like that's most big projects. If you're working at a big organization or a big company or a big personal project or startup, like it's likely your code base isn't that simple. And
especially if a couple of different developers have touched it and any time has passed code bases get very large. I mean,
So
the context window
yeah.
of LLM is pretty small. Even then, like the more you give it, the more confused it'll get by stuff. It could be many years and many kind of like engineering breakthroughs before you could feed a large legacy code base into.
Well, people are working on this.
Yeah,
and,
I mean,
like,
it's an active area of study, but we'll see.
It's
We'll see
very
how
much a
quickly it
never say
happens.
never situation. I think like I've seen already some people have built really cool tools that you're able to like give a GitHub repository to, and it like reads through the whole GitHub repository and figures out
Starts
like,
opening issues, right?
and it's able to like explain your code base, open issues. Like these are like really cool use cases. But there's a difference between being able to like understand a code base and being able to like write the whole code base
Yeah.
from scratch. And I don't know. I mean, like I think we'll see improvements over time, and that's one of the really exciting things about this field and this area. Not to spend so much time talking about it.
Yeah, well, whenever new tools come out, developers should learn them.
So, I mean, this is fairly meta, but for this week, maybe not as much meta as Apple, but what do you think of the new Vision Pro and like what spatial computing means for education? Like when I see this, I envision like a couple years down the line or sooner being able to interact with like physical manifestations of like a binary tree or a hash table or like a computer chip. Like
being able
what
to
does
take
that look like
abstract
to you?
things that are like ideas in a textbook and bring them into the realm of like something you can see and potentially even touch. I think it's really exciting for a lot of kind of mechanical engineering things, for sure. Maybe for some semiconductor engineering, but it may also be a helpful tool for understanding, abstract software concepts like data structures, algorithms, like seeing how the data cascades through a particular application. Like, we see all these different renditions of programming in the future. I think the show Westworld had one that was pretty cool with like the tablets, and of course, the computer interfaces from Minority Report, where you have to stand there and move your hands around all day, and like you have to be incredibly fit just to use a computer in the world of Minority Report. But I mean, I've always been like very excited about these just from a wow perspective, like watching, Iron Man and seeing all the different interface. You strap something onto your head and it's essentially like augmented reality. And so you can put whatever you want in physical space. Microsoft has done this for quite a while with the HoloLens. I'm sure there are some good industrial applications. I will be amazed if it really makes that big of a difference over just looking at a 2D screen. Like, I can represent a lot of stuff really well in 2D on a flat rectangle thing that I'm looking at. And
it's true.
Look no
iPad's
further.
pretty good.
Yeah, absolutely. And as Sergey Brin observed, if you hold the screen, like a screen that's like this far from your face, might as well be an IMAX screen, in terms of like how you're looking at it.
Well, that's what the Vision Pro kind of is, right? Yeah. Like, I think for me, like obviously, like VR existed for like a decade now, and you could already do these things where you like move around with objects in virtual reality, like using the MetaQuest or Oculus. But what's interesting about this new Apple device to me is that it's like the best example of like not really AR because you're still looking at screens.
Yeah,
but like
AR, augmented reality,
where
reality.
It feels like you're still able to see your surroundings. So you're not like in this enclosed view. You like can kind of see things like in your real life. I don't know if this is necessarily like it is still like very early, very expensive, but maybe there is a world where that's something that people use for more than just entertainment. I don't know.
I think a lot of it comes down to like cost. Like, if you're a wealthy person and you want to have a system on a chip like laid out in front of you so you can like look at all the different, components of, a processor. That's great. But until there's like a huge install base of people who can afford to do that, who's going to write the software for it, right? That was like the Google Glass kind of chicken and the egg problem. Nobody was really that interested in Google Glass, and Google was working very hard to try to get people to develop for Google Glass. But I knew a lot of people in San Francisco, Silicon Valley during the time that Google Glass was like rising before they kind of abandoned the project. And I don't think anybody really built apps for it because the install base was so small. So you have to get like a big enough install base for people to start really building meaningful apps. But like assuming that they can solve that business case problem and that there are really cool, experiences that you can put in there. I have yet to see like a killer app for VR. Like my understanding is there's something about the way the brain works and the ears work and stuff. Like you can't really move around in VR without feeling a little sick. So almost all the VR type games have been like experiences where you have a fixed point of view, or you're like sitting somewhere and you're able to look around, or you're on like a roller coaster or something like that, because that's not going to make you sick.
Well, you're also fundamentally like
right?
wearing a ski mask, right? Like it's difficult to move around with that weight on your head without, recognizing that you have that weight on your head. I do think there's a couple crucial differences with the Vision Pro because it's Apple that solve some of those problems. One of which is it's Apple's ecosystem already. So all of your photos, all of these applications that are on the App Store by default are like also on the Vision Pro as 2D screens. And that's not exactly building for the Vision Pro, but it solves a lot of the utility issues that I think other devices that are starting from scratch have. The other one is
the backward compatibility. Apple. By the way, like with the video game industry,
really
backward compatibility has also always been like a huge deal. PlayStation 3 can play PlayStation 2 games.
Well, I actually think that's one of the challenges that Apple faces. Is Apple's never really been a gaming company, or a company that like people go to for games, and that's one of the main applications of VR up until now. Like Meta has a huge advantage over them on that specifically, but you can also just like mirror demo your PS4 or Xbox to it if you really wanted to, if that's something you want to do. Yeah. And to me, at least, the big difference here is this being Apple. I find it unlikely they're going to abandon. And if I think about
I think they'll put a lot of money into it. I think the years of R&D are ahead.
Like the iPhone wasn't a perfect product as like the first iteration of it. It didn't even have an app store as the first iteration of it. But like by the time the iPhone 5 or the iPhone 6 rolled around, it was like a mass market product that like basically is the same iPhone that exists today with like some minor changes. Yeah. And that's like one of the best products ever made. And so to me, what I'm really excited about is not this really expensive tech demo that exists today.
Yeah, but where's headed?
Where is this going to be in 5 years? I'm really excited to try that. And like I think that the people who are excited about the Vision Pro today are like really excited about that feature too. And you're sort of like thinking about spatial computing. Not to go back to contextual computing, but like, I think to me, one of the coolest things I can imagine is like, I'm wearing contacts right now. Right. But I have glasses. I almost always wear glasses when I'm like in classes and stuff. What if my glasses just also like had a screen to the side that was able to show me information about what I'm looking at or who I'm talking to or what I said the last time I talked to this person or when their birthday is, or is keeping notes during class, or even just up relevant information.
Just putting a clock up there would be pretty awesome, right? Like never needing to know what time or which direction am I facing? Am I facing
south? A clock, the weather, direction. Yeah. Like there's so much information that like having a HUD or an HUD like around your
head-up display.
Yeah, could be really valuable. And like so, I know someone at Yale who's working on these like glasses that basically make captions. It's like subtitles for your life. And he's working with the Stanford kid to do this. And to me, that's like a very early application of what like the long-term potential of this is. Yeah. Which is to like be able to like have all of this additional information.
Yeah. I mean, even, well, you mentioned subtitles for your life, like literally subtitling. I don't want like some simultaneous translation app like telling me what somebody's saying and in my ear. I'd love to just read subtitles when I'm talking to somebody in a language I don't understand or something. You know what I'm saying? Like think of what a game.
I mean, that would be so helpful for me. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's all very interesting where this is possible to go. I'm glad that our.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's tons of like obvious utility if you can get it to work in the form factor of like a pair of glasses.
Even if it's a little
battery
thicker
pack
than a
in
pair
there,
of
you get the
glasses.
projection, all that stuff. I think they'll get there.
Feels a little
maybe in,
weird
like, 10
with
or
the
15
ski
years.
mask.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't want to wear a weird ski mask. And I want to actually be able to see things and not rely on the software. Like, I'm never going to feel comfortable, like, driving or something if that could, like, short out and, like, suddenly I'm completely blinded or something like that. Because the pass-through vision is actually, like, they render what the cameras are seeing.
It's still a screen. Yeah, it's not a pass-through screen. And to me, I'm a lot more interested in AR than I am in augmented reality than virtual reality.
I think for the practical reasons of AR is like informational, VR is like experiential. Like I do play games. Like I'm a big fan of like Doom Eternal and like the really deep gameplay of that came out a few years ago. And when I'm playing the game, it does not matter what, like how big the screen is or anything. Like I'm entranced. There was this great documentary about the history of like industrial design that I watched a long time ago. Can't remember the name of it. I think it's by the same guy that did the Helvetica documentary. If you haven't seen that, that's a really good one. But basically, they had this like German engineer who's talking about like, I built the perfect laptop. Look, you can do this. It's got all these different design factors and stuff. And then he gets this made, and then he gets the prototype and he sits down and he's using it, and he realized very quickly, like once you start actually using a computer, all that other stuff just melts away and you're just focused on the task at hand. You don't need like 4K giant screen. Like you don't need like a lot of the usability interface. Like you go back and you play an old arcade game from 40 years ago and it's just a joystick and buttons, and you can kind of mesh with that game just as well as you can with a modern game where you're using like a keyboard and a mouse or something like that, right? Like it's really amazing how the human brain works, how we're so able to tune in and tune out all of the noise and really just focus on things. So to some extent, I do almost feel like using like VR headset is an overkill, really. Like, do I really need that? Is it really that much more immersive than what's already going on inside my brain? Yeah. So I've always kind of been a skeptic.
I don't have one, so
yeah,
I can't really speak to that.
Yeah. And in terms of
but
education,
it's like, yeah,
there's an argument that reading a book, your mind is doing all this stuff, and it can be almost as immersive an experience reading a book as it could be having like some VR, educational experience. Now, some people might argue that like they're completely different and the use case is completely different, but it really just depends on how into reading you get and how powerful your mind is at bringing up these representations and stuff like that. Yeah, I mean, I don't mind. I don't want to sound like a Luddite or anything, but like books are great and books are going to exist as long as humanity exists. Maybe not paper books. I don't think there's really like a strong argument other than like nostalgia for having a physical paper book. We can have like a nice backlit screen. Sorry, I know like half the people in the audience are probably like, what the heck, Quincy? I love reading
Kindles are great.
Books. Yeah,
love Kindles. Yeah,
but like the notion of text as an interface for your human brain, it just carries so much information. People say like a picture's worth 1,000 words. Well, depends on the words. It depends on the picture. Like a few words. Like Ernest Hemingway wrote like flash fiction. He had like this 6-word story, which I'm going to tell you right now. For sale. Baby shoes. Never worn. Just those 6 words like conveys like an entire kind of like mood. And I mean, like, it'd be hard to capture that in a picture in the exact same way as that, those 6-word story captures.
So like 6 words are worth 1,000 pictures. Like,
I mean, it just depends. If you think of this video, I mean, this video is probably tens of thousands of pictures, right? It's 30 frames per second.
Our words matter a lot more than like the picture of me in this room with the blackboard.
Exactly. Yeah. Like if you just showed the picture outside of context, you'd be like, okay, it's Quincy, it's some other guy.
The audio matters a lot more.
Video, right?
Yeah.
Like there's so much more to like education, and I feel like the education industry, if you want to call it that, like because it is industrialized, much to my chagrin, is around chasing these things like, oh, if we could get everybody a HoloLens, or we could completely change the world.
A smart board.
Got everybody a smart board, or we got every kid like their own laptop or something like that. And that's not necessarily like there's a lot of technological solutionism in education, and I'm much more of a back to basics kind of person. Like I obviously I see the value in video, see the value in multimedia and stuff like that, not just reading textbooks, but I also see the value in going up to a whiteboard with somebody and sketching out, things and learning from them in that way too. So the old ways are not necessarily, abandoned. You can just expand your repertoire. But I would absolutely say that, like, in my opinion, most education should probably be textual because it's just an extremely efficient way of communicating things. And, like I kind of look at, I'm an old man yelling at a cloud, right? Like TikTok and like watching a 60-second video that's trying to compress all this information into it. You get into a loop of information grazing where you're getting like really superficial topical kind of information, but you're not really going very deep at all. So that is one thing where like I value the fact that people put out these lengthy podcasts. Like I listen to tons of podcasts that are several hours long. I watch tons of video essays on YouTube that are like 3 or 4 hours long, right? And I learned so much more from those than I probably would have learned from watching, however many TikToks that would be, like 200 TikToks about the same topic, right? Just because there's going to be so much repetition.
Yeah,
so
I mean,
people covering the same thing over and over.
there's a really great article, sort of or like essay along the lines of what you were talking about with text. It's called "Text is the Universal API." Um,
Text is the
think it
universal
was
API.
by Charles Dickens. Yeah, but very much like sort of speaking to the same thing that you were talking about. This idea that like it always has been and all like will be the main way in which we like language is so important in
Yeah.
how we understand our world, and convey information. It's just so efficient. It's so effective.
Yeah, and I mean, one of the reasons
And
AI is so good at generating images is because it uses text to like reason about how to generate images. Like if you
well,
look
yeah,
at
like there
a
are
lot of the new
embeddings.
tools like Dolly or well, what's the one that there are several ones. What's the one that you use Discord to talk with? For some reason, it's escaping my memory. The really popular one that people use to create all those
Midjourney?
images.
Midjourney.
Midjourney, yes.
It's Midjourney, I think. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, for me, like the most mind-blowing thing, the first mind-blowing thing that I saw with like all of this AI was NLP techniques of
Yeah, natural
just
language
like
processing
creating
techniques.
vector space of words. You would just embed like 10,000 of the most common English words, and then you could do arithmetic on those words to do like king minus man plus woman equals queen.
Yeah.
And that like you could represent words and like their relationships through math. That was just incredible to me. And that you can do that with all kinds of different words, and that you can do that then with finite state transducers, and you can eventually like get to something like GPT-2, which was really the first time I saw something like a generative pre-trained transformer model. And it was just like absolutely mind-blowing, like very, very early version of these AI image generators that could do like a 32 by 32 image. And immediately you're like this is gonna be revolutionary.
Yeah.
And that is something I was lucky to be exposed to early through doing research, but it's also just I don't know, like I think it's going to continue to improve over the coming years.
Yeah. It remains to be seen whether we're going to get giant step changes like we get with, GPT.
Moore's law, like is it going to be Moore's law or faster? Who knows? It's too early to say, right?
Yeah. So I just, and, we've talked a lot about AI ethics and stuff like that. One of the reasons I don't really care to think that much about, whether we're going to build Skynet is because I'm not convinced that the growth rate is like that right now. I don't think we need to worry that much about it. I'm not saying you shouldn't worry about that, but I don't think that that's the most immediate concern. The more immediate concerns are misinformation and scams and stuff like that.
I mean, so I agree with that. I think the argument that people will make is that it's not a like linear thing or
Yeah.
even an exponential one, but that like there's just some kind of breakthrough that hasn't happened yet. That's sort of like we have no idea when that breakthrough is going to
And
happen.
it could be
It could be
several
tomorrow.
consecutive breakthroughs that need to happen, but they could happen very
Exactly.
quickly, or they could
And
take
who knows? Like
20
I
years.
like if you talk to the best AI researchers in the world, like the timeline is all over the place between them. So that's for me like why like I'm not an expert on this. This is not something that I should be like my opinion doesn't matter very much. And therefore like I just try to like stay out of
Yeah.
those
Well,
conversations for now.
one thing that you do have probably a very nuanced opinion on is physical activity as a programmer. I know that at Yale you're a captain on the running team, and I can only imagine how good you have to be at running and how into running you have to be to like pull that off. But maybe you could talk a little bit about running and the role that it plays in your life.
Yeah, so importantly, I'm a captain on the club running team, not the
Club running team. Okay.
varsity running team. They are incredibly talented runners on like the official team. We do it for fun. But I ran varsity in high school and then continued at Yale. It's a great group of people to run with. And I think like what's really interesting to me within the context of our conversation, which is focused obviously on an audience of mostly programmers or developers, um, is that there seems to me to be like this huge overlap between people in this ecosystem and running. Just so many software
Yeah.
engineers I know also like that's their like chosen sport or like mechanism for exercise, along with maybe like some lifting or something.
Yeah.
But
And I have to be very candid that I used to run a lot when I was first learning to code, and recently I've switched to kind of like what I call mall walking, just because it's like lower impact, and it's a little easier for me to like digest a podcast when I'm not hearing thump 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 thump. It's just a little bit more mellow, and you still get a lot of cardiovascular benefit just from walking quickly. But yes, I also was a programmer who ran a lot, and so it's not lost on me that I know a lot of other programmers who run a lot too and are very passionate about that type of activity.
well, I guess the thing that I'm interested in asking you about or talking with you about is what you think it is about running that is just like something that meshes well with
Yeah.
people who like to program to do software engineering. Because I have some thoughts on it, I think.
Yeah, I mean, like I'll throw out some naive guesses. It is a way to decompress, and it's something that you kind of do automatically. Like once you start running, you don't really have to think about it too much. You just keep going, and it gives you a lot of time and space to like maybe think about engineering problems you're facing or think about what you want to do next with a given project.
I mean, that's exactly what I do too. Um, I think like there's like definitely the element of it. It's just something you can do that's like good exercise while also letting your mind sort of like roam free. And you can either think about what you're working on or you can sort of let yourself have some time to decompress, de-stress. But it's also about, I think to me, this idea of like I think a runner's high or like there's almost like a flow state you enter into when you're running. It's long distance running, because I do specifically long distance running. That you just sort of like get into it and it's a very similar feeling, I think, to the feeling you have when you sit down to like do a like pretty like intense programming session, of like really being sort of zoned into exactly what it is that you're doing right then. To me, those are actually very similar things. I was curious if you felt the same way.
Definitely, like there's this old saying that like there's this old joke that what's the purpose of a programmer's body is to keep their brain off the ground, right? Like that's how so many programmers and developers, and I guess you could say knowledge workers by extension, have treated their body. Let's go eat some fast food. We gotta get some sleep real quick. Everything is kind of like it's you're almost like paying lip service to the fact that you have a corporeal form that has to be maintained. And I think that's to people's detriment if they neglect their health. And running is something that really, boosts your cardiovascular, your respiratory health. Probably has all kinds of other positive knock-on effects because historically, ancient humans probably ran a lot more than they do today. Whether that's running toward prey or running from predators. And there's something that does feel really good. You get all these endorphins when you run. So maybe it just boosts your energy level. It boosts your ability to think. I mean, like I said, I feel like I get a lot of these just from walking. And again, I'm a 43-year-old man who has a lot of weight just from working out for years and years. It is kind of hard on your knees if you go running, and it's hard on your lower leg too. So people who are listening to this, I know, and people who have mobility issues and stuff, I wouldn't say just throw this aside and go run. But I would say any physical activity you can engage in is probably going to be a virtuous circle in terms of improving your productivity, improving your ability to think, improving your ability to sleep, improving your energy level, all these things. Your body is a machine, and you want to make sure that machine gets regularly used and doesn't just becomes this thing that you kind of spite. There were so many years of my life when I was a kid where I was just man, I wish I was just the lawnmower man. I wish I could just be everywhere and do everything and not have to think about what am I going to eat for breakfast, or oh man, it's late, I need to get some sleep. I didn't want to have those limitations. I wanted to live in a realm of pure abstraction and have that kind of power of being a disembodied entity, right? Probably tale as old as time. I wouldn't be surprised if they wrote about this in Greek mythology or something. Somebody giving up their body to become this omnipresent spirit that can do whatever, right? But the reality is you have a heart, you have lungs, you have a brain, you have all these other things in your body, and you need to keep those sharp if you want to be able to perform. And, I'm optimizing for longevity. I want to live to be 100 years old. I don't think there's any reason, unless you have genetic disorders, which I don't seem to have. I've been very blessed in that regard. I went and I got a colonoscopy ahead of schedule because I had blood in my stool and I was concerned about it. And thankfully, no cancer. But, you want to be on top of those things. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And a big part of preventing things is exercise, right? That's the health, exercise, or the diet, exercise, sleep triangle, right? The thing that everybody should be thinking about as they age. So anyway, I'll get off my soapbox, but that is my immediate response to why I think so many programmers are runners, because they're also probably pretty smart, well-adjusted people who do want to optimize for a long, healthy life.
Yeah, I mean, and it totally is a great way to do that. I think on the subject of viewing bodies as machines, and this might be a great last question to talk about on our podcast today. We've talked about a lot of different sci-fi and interesting media related to programming or technology or AI today, from Westworld to Her to, I think you mentioned Minority Report and a couple others. But I guess you have any recommendations for me? What are your favorite books, movies, TV shows within this genre or medium, for any of the listeners?
Yeah, I mean,
maybe go check out, because I have also read and watched all of the things you just mentioned, and they're all amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say if you haven't seen Her, you should watch that. That's definitely the best kind of singularity movie I've ever seen. I think it's the most realistic, frankly. I think the machines are going to just be these kind of benevolent, they're just going to see humans as oh, whatever, go do your little human things. We're going to be doing our super intelligence thing over here. There could be some dark feature. I used to watch a lot of cyberpunk and dystopian stuff and read all the William Gibson novels and all that stuff. And I'm not that pessimistic anymore. I'm much more optimistic. So I think Her is pretty optimistic as a movie in general. If we're going to have a singularity, hopefully that's the singularity we have, where the AIs are too interested in recreating Mark Twain and talking to him. than like figuring out a way to like, turn all the humans into paper clips, so to speak. The famous Nick Bostrom paperclip problem of if you give an AI something to optimize. I mean, rather than recommending science fiction movies and stuff, books, like I'll be completely candid, I don't have a lot of time to consume fiction these days. Almost everything I watch is like a documentary. But again,
any good ones of those?
Her would be my recommendation. Again, probably everybody's already seen it. Rewatch the Matrix trilogy. A lot of people like bash the second and the third one as not that interesting or like bad CG or something. Computer generated imagery, CGI. But I genuinely think that's a really well made, and I haven't seen the fourth one, but I genuinely think
I haven't either.
The late 1990s, early 2000s Matrix movies, if you rewatch it, they're much deeper than you may have realized when you were a kid watching them. And what it says about artificial intelligence, what it says about the human condition, if you really go down that rabbit hole of like understanding the Matrix, there's a lot there. Like I watched it maybe like 5 or 6 years ago. I watched all three of them, and I was just like, wow. So like I never got any of this as a kid. I always thought the machines were bad, right? They're trying to kill everybody. But then the more I watched, the more I realized, oh, this is actually like, it's a dystopian movie because humans make it dystopian in a way. So I would recommend rewatching those and maybe reading some of the fan theories and stuff like that. I'm not sure if the Wachowski sisters have ever publicly talked about like exactly why, like what the story's supposed to mean or anything, but there's a lot there. And it's, of course, certainly the first one is an amazing movie. It's one of my favorite movies of all time. So
would you take the blue pill or the red pill, Quincy?
The red pill is the one where you go deeper in. Absolutely. I would take that. Yeah, because I mean, I would want to know. I wouldn't be content like that guy that wants to get put back in the Matrix. I would never want to do that. Like once you know something, you can't turn back. You got to be true to yourself. You can't delude yourself. And I think most strong, people would not succumb to that kind of temptation of wanting to go back to being ignorant. I don't think there's any turning back the clocks. What about you? You probably have a lot more recommended. What are some science fiction that you would recommend if people want to have a good feel for like AI, good cases, bad cases? Oh, The Expanse. The creators of The Expanse
is pretty good.
They've said in the future AI, like in the Expanse universe, AI doesn't even really matter that much. Like it's doing all kinds of things passively, like what you were saying earlier about like contextual, or what was the term you used, where AI just figures out what needs to be done?
Proactive computing.
Proactive. Yeah, so there's tons of proactive AI. It's like figuring out like all the different little minor calibrations that the ship needs to make, while the pilot is sitting there actually doing like the most, I guess, important high level decisions, and then those decisions are cascading down throughout the ship's systems. So AI is there, but in the Expanse universe, AI is not that earth changing of a thing, or I guess solar system changing of a thing. It's just a thing that is a tool that they use. And there wasn't some like big AI war or anything like that in the Expanse history. That was just, how they do it. And to some extent, Star Trek, similarly, AI is just another tool. It's one of many fascinating technologies alongside teleportation, tricorders, all these different tools, right?
Yeah. The Expanse is a great one, although there's not a whole lot of like AI as part of that story. I think if I think about great movies that are in this area or genre, absolutely love both Blade Runner movies.
Mm-hmm.
Those are both really good. The Spatial.
Don't sleep on the sequel. It's good.
The sequel's super underrated. With Ryan Gosling, absolutely, like I think the maybe equally good depiction of like a personal AI as like the one in Her. Ex Machina is also one that people sleep on sometimes.
Yeah, it's a good movie. I saw that.
Yeah. I also like I think there's a lot of really good TV and books in this genre. Westworld is very sadly canceled. I'm really like
I only saw the first two seasons. The first season was much better than the second season. Did you watch
the first season? Was incredible. Yeah, I watched the whole show. There's 4 seasons actually.
Oh, okay.
I think that the sort of went back to basics with the fourth season. And then they kind of left. I think they knew it was going to get canceled, so they kind of left it on like an ending that's sort of unsatisfying, but still like relatively ties things up, kind of. But that has so many interesting questions about consciousness and exploitation and like what it means to be human versus like an artificial intelligence or a machine. Like definitely really interesting questions that aren't fully explored, but like are at least asked, kind of in the same way that like Lost does. Dune is actually really interesting, even though there's no AI in it, because their history of Dune is that there was this like massive AI war.
Yeah.
And then they just like got rid of all the AI afterwards.
That's very
So,
Battlestar Galactica. So that's another show.
Yeah.
That, like I watched like I guess it was the 90s Battlestar Galactica, early 2000s. And that is all about AI and the dangers of AI. You can't network computers because the moment you network them, you run the risk of them becoming super intelligent and plotting against humans. And they're basically fighting this entire race of artificial beings that they've constructed. And they've been at this lengthy war, and the machines are trying to annihilate the humans. Really cool show.
Yeah. I mean, I mentioned Clara and the Sun before, but that book is also about like sort of a dystopian world in which people are like sort of genetically designer babies, but also they have like AI tutors sort of that live with them.
Interesting.
It's
and the Sun.
it's like a very like sort of slice of life book that has like some deeper subtext. Yeah, I mean, I think there's like even something as simple as like Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. Like these are books that don't really have necessarily anything to do with AI, like in the surface level. But it fundamentally is about like mankind trying to like sort of play God.
Yeah.
And what does that is on some level what we're doing here. And what does that mean for us to be trying to create like intelligence beyond our own? There's a lot of interesting questions there.
Yeah, and what does intelligence beyond our own mean? Because humans, when you group them together, can make pretty big, important decisions. I mean, you could argue that like the economy is a whole bunch of individual self-interested actors that has the net effect of us having this abundance that we have today, for example, right? So like emergent behavior from different species like leafcutter ants. We were hanging out with some leafcutter ants the other day, and my kids were terrified of them. But we spent some time and watched some documentaries about how they work and stuff. It's fascinating, and it's just emergent behavior from lots of entities together. And so will we have a super intelligence that not only exceeds individual human beings, but it exceeds the compute of the entire human kind of wetware network that is?
I guess we'll see, right?
Yeah,
Might be in our lifetimes.
Yeah. I mean, I imagine the answer is yes, we will eventually have that. It's just what's the timeline? Are we talking, Blade Runner timeline, or are we talking, the Expanse timeline or Star Trek timeline, right?
2049 could be.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Awesome. Well, it's been such a blast talking with you. I mean, we talked about so many different things. I am going to leave videos, your courses that you've created, your AI course, AI and Safety, and also Safe.ai, which is a charity that's, I think, largely funded by AI companies, including OpenAI. They have an AI course that we published on FreeCodeCamp as well, that I think is much more detail-oriented than yours, but yours is like the broad sweeping, like, here's a framework for thinking about AI safety. And here are the, just some of the many considerations and why AI safety is important. So if you want to watch the Safe AI course, I recommend watching Seth's course first. And I will link to both in the show notes as well. And then, thanks for everything you're doing for the FreeCodeCamp community through teaching these courses. Thanks for, developing these tools and continuing to push forward the state of the art. We're very excited to see what you all come up with next.
Thanks for having me, Quincy. It was a blast.
Until next week, happy coding.